Oh, no. I don't know. I think be open-minded. There's so many changes going on that you have to be open-minded and look at the pros and cons as much as you can.
Sure.
Come to your own decision. And don't grab on these so-called hastily contrived solutions to problems. Look at it in your own time zone and try to make the best of it what you can.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Vox Populi. Today I'm here with Daryl. Now, Daryl, we were just chatting for a little bit, but do you want to go over with me again, just from the beginning, what?
Well, briefly, I started out while pawn in 1954. I got out of the Marines in 1952, and I had several different odd jobs. I worked in the Green Bay area. I worked next to the reformatory for 3 summers on a golf course. I was very familiar with the reformatory. I had been in there to watch basketball games, but I never thought about working there. But 2 of my friends took an exam at the vocational school to be guards at Waupun. And they got the job, and they started the job in Waupun, and they liked it, and they talked to me. And I thought, well, I'll give it a try too. So I took the test, and I was accepted, and I started at Waupun in April of 1954. I was 21 years old. It was a big change in my life. It was a great experience. It was tough, but I loved it. I really appreciate what the state of Wisconsin had. They ran it was a good prison. They taught us properly. It was a safe environment. Everybody respected the rules and regulations. So I had a great 4.5, 5 years there before I transferred back to Green Bay. Outside of that, I met some of the best friends I had in my life at Waupun were fellow officers and staff members, and I really admired the leadership at the prison. They were very, very instrumental in shaping my life because they were tough but fair and honorable people, and I needed that. So it was a great experience for me.
That's great. And then when did you step up through the ladder to become warden?
Well, after a while, I got tired of living in a room in Waupun and decided, well, maybe I better go home to Green Bay and get together with my hometown folks. So I transferred to the reformatory at Green Bay at the time. And I enjoyed that. It was different. It was a lot different than Waupun. It was they were administering to a younger population. It was mostly juveniles, some adults, but mostly juveniles. And it took a lot of orientation for me to get used to it. But I liked it. There was good staff. And after a while, I really, really liked it. They were a lot more lenient in many, many ways. And they were more lenient to staff in many, many ways. So I enjoyed that too. But I took an exam to be a lieutenant. They were opening a new prison in Fox Lake, Wisconsin. So I took the exam and went for my interview, and I was accepted, and I was offered the job. But I had just bought a house in Green Bay, so it was a difficult decision to make. We hadn't even moved in it yet. We had bought it and were remodeling it. But my wife insisted that we take a chance and go and rent our house out, with the thought that maybe after a while we would transfer back to Green Bay. Well, we went to Green Bay. We went to Fox Lake. And it was a great, great job change. I really enjoyed it, loved it. It was hard to get used to living in Fox Lake, a small little town, little resort town. But after a while, we really got used to it and got to love it. But I gradually went up the ladder from lieutenant to captain to took an exam for security director for the Division of Adult Institutions, and was offered and accepted that job in Madison. Spent about 4 years in there. I was promoted to deputy administrator of the Bureau of Adult Institutions, and after 4 years after that, I was promoted to the administrator for about 4 years. And then I had an opportunity to laterally transfer to Warden at Fox Lake, which I did take and retired there after 4 years.
Sure.
Which was a wonderful experience in my life.
The whole thing, or being warden?
Yes, and then I served for a period of time for a couple of years as the acting warden of Fox Lake and Waupun, which was a really great experience for me. I loved it. It was a great time of my life.
What about that job specifically did you like so much? What about that job specifically did you like so much?
Which job?
You said being the warden of both Fox Lake and Waupun.
Well, yeah, I had loved working at Waupun when I worked there, and I was very familiar with the institution. I had worked every conceivable job that they had there at one time, and I knew and respected the institution. So when I went back there, even as acting, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and made some changes, did some things that I'm proud of, and I was asked to stay on, but I loved Fox Lake, and it was more of a challenge to me than Waupun really was. So I elected to go back to Fox Lake, and I retired from there.
Sure.
It was a great experience. My whole career in corrections was great.
And you said you started in 1953, correct?
1954.
1954? And then when did you retire?
In 1990, January 1st,
Wow.
1990.
So over the course of that, what, 36 years?
Yeah.
Right? How did the correction system change?
Well, it changed in many ways dramatically. It was a well, you know, respected open system when I started. It was Wisconsin Corrections was known throughout the country as a great, wonderful, well-driven operation. It was well regarded throughout the country as one of the finest correctional systems in the country, and it was apparently. I mean, I didn't know because I didn't know what to compare it to. But anyway. The political system got in the way. A governor, Patrick Lucy, was elected, and for some reason or other, he had it in his head to change the prison system. Appointed a council on criminal justice to review the whole correctional system, all the prison system, and make changes. Well, they made changes. They did things like we had, at the prison, for example, we had big industries in the tailor shop, the laundry, shoe shop, twine plant. We had sign shops. We had big industry, put a lot of inmates to work. Well, he thought having 100 and some inmates working in the laundry was demeaning because inmates didn't want to work in the laundry when they got out. And the same with the tailor shop. We had 100 and some inmates working there. Well, inmates weren't going to go be released and work as tailors, so we had to close them down and severely reduce them, which was a big loss and made a lot of inmates without work, without assignments. And that multiplied over time in all of our work areas. And it was a very tough time in corrections all over. The chief political officer of the state was acting in an anti-corrections way. He was bound and determined to change it, and change it in what way? You know, we could only hope that it was for the best, but it wasn't.
Sure.
It became more liberal, much more liberal. But the more liberal we made it, the more control that was lost. And it didn't help the inmates, didn't help staff. So eventually it leveled off a little bit, but it's still a political system. It's not a professional system. Politicians are appointed to run corrections, and politicians do what politicians do.
Yeah.
And so we're stuck with that. And it's really unfortunate.
Yeah, a lot of people nowadays are calling for even more correctional reform, you know.
Oh, sure. There are some people out there would want you to release all of them, you know.
Yeah.
Because, well, if they're, non-violent, what are we doing in prison with them?
Sure.
Release them. Well, that's a stupid argument.
Mm-hmm.
And, people are locked up for a reason. They're not locked up because they're innocently walking down the street and picked up and put in a slammer and sentenced to jail. They're sentenced because they did something. Our laws, our judges determined that they were to go to prison. Now, why they would want to change that, I don't know. I mean, you can review the sentencing laws and all that, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, if you commit a crime, you should be caught and you should be punished for it. Now, if that means that more blacks are locked up than whites, so why are they committing the crimes? Look at that.
Yeah.
It's not because it's racially biased, it's because they're committing the crimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand this. Well, the racial divide is there. We're sentencing more blacks than we are whites. Well, yeah. The judge is finding them guilty.
Yeah.
So their behavior has to change. Not the criminal justice system. So I'm at a loss for words to describe how I feel about that. It just eludes my common sense thinking.
Do you think that there's an argument that could be made that inmates should be treated better? Do you think that there's an argument
better
there?
than what? I mean, how are they treated now? They're kept in a safe environment. They're fed. They're clothed. They're treated health-wise. Health-wise, they're treated better than a hell of a lot of citizens are.
Mm-hmm.
They're locked up. They're confined.
Mm-hmm.
That's punishment.
Right.
But they're treated well while they're there. But they have to conform to the rules there to protect everybody, the staff and inmates. You have to conform to the rules. If you don't conform to the rules, you're going to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it has to be. And if somebody can come up with a different formula, let them go for it. But a lot of people have tried, and it hasn't worked yet. So I'm a believer in the simple philosophy. Hey, they're inmates. They got to be taken care of. You got to take care of them. You got to feed them. You got to clothe them. You got to be civil to them. You got to do the right thing. But they're there. They're confined. They're ordered there by law.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to change that, you have to be very careful how you change that. We have a parole system that looks at them, and they look at their overall conduct and determine if they can be released early. That's a pretty good system. But to go beyond that, I'm not sure what system is going to qualify. I don't know.
I guess if you were still in a position of power today, would you change anything? Would you run anything differently?
Well, yeah, I've been gone from corrections for a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to know what the hell is going on in all the prisons.
Well, 30 years now, right?
I don't know, but I know what works in prison. I know what programs work in prison. I know what doesn't work in prison. So I guess I would, take a look at what's going on and make adjustments where I thought were necessary. And I would maintain that line between staff and inmates. You can't combine the two. No matter how many people will try to tell you that staff have to be nicer, it can't be. There's a line between being an officer and a staff member and being an inmate that has to be maintained.
Sure.
And I think if people understand that, and you have to reinforce that you do your job best by obeying the law, obeying the rules and regulations.
Yeah.
If the rules and regulations are not right, change them. But if they're there, obey the rules.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to obey the rules, you're going to be corrected. And if you don't like being corrected, obey the rules. It's that simple. And to make something more out of that, to me, is just kind of gilding a lily. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult.
Do you think that same principle applies with free citizens compared to, like, there's kind of a big argument nowadays about whether or not for free citizens, law and order is the way, or if certain laws are justified to break in a way, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, that's why we have protests. People protest the law. But there's a line between civil protesting and terrorism.
Yeah.
And, these protesting movements have broken off into excessive terrorism. That's what it is. They're arsonists, hoodlums, vandals. Now, if the protesters can't separate themselves from that, they're going to be in big trouble, because there's going to be an anti-protest movement.
Yeah.
And well, that's bound to happen.
Yeah, there has been. And
yes.
Like I told you earlier, I was following around some of those protests and talking with people, and all of the people that I spoke with personally, they completely disowned the violence and the arson and whatnot. But like you said, they are still associated with that, whether or not it's them doing it, they are associated with that.
Again, the problem is leadership. Where is the black leadership in this whole period of time? They're there urging on the protests, condemning this incident in Washington, which should be condemned. It was not right.
Which one?
The officer on the next of the.
Oh, sure, that was in Minneapolis, but yeah.
Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to argue with that. That was not right. But to foster this whole idea of terrorism because of it, it's beyond me. And the black leadership, they're not condemning it. They're saying, well, it's on this way. On one hand it's this, and on the other hand is that. Nobody's got the guts enough to stand up and say, stop.
Yeah.
Stop, this is not right. They always qualify that. And it's not to be qualified. Terrorism is not forgivable.
Sure.
And I resent that they don't stand out and take a stand against it. And I don't think until they do that, they're going to cross that divide, because white terrorists will take over.
Well, why do you say that?
Nobody wants to hear that, but that's what's going to happen. The rednecks will take over.
Oh, sure. You're saying if they continue to be violent?
Well, sure. It's not. Society won't stand for that. And if they don't, if the black leadership doesn't do something about it, they're going to derail their whole idea of equality and this whole business of racial bias. You can't do it. You can't have it both ways. You can't be a terrorist on one hand and speak about racial justice on the other. It isn't going to work.
Yeah.
People aren't going to stand for it.
All right, let's take a little bit more wholesome turn. Let's talk about your childhood again. We were talking about that a little bit earlier off camera. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, a little bit. like I said, my dad died when we were all young, and he was a cop. He was a well-respected cop. He was well-regarded. And fortunately for us, he left with a good reputation, which was good for us growing up, you know, because people remembered him and they remembered us.
They sort of respected your family?
Right,
okay.
right. So in that regard, you know, we had that, he left us without any money, with a lot of goodwill, you know. And my mother continued on that tradition. And actually, we were just poor kids that were brought up in a Catholic household, you know, made sure we all got through Catholic school, and you know, we were the Catholic way. And that helped us all survive too, because we were all together on that. But like I say, when my mother died, that shook up the whole family, because she was the rock that was left, and my older brother and my sister took over and did a nice job. And my sister's husband was a good, really good man too. He was a good man to me especially. He was a golf pro that I worked for him for 3 summers on the golf course. Did groundskeeping. One of the best jobs I ever had in my life. But prior to that, I worked on a farm for 3 summers during World War II. When I was went out there when I was 12 years old, and I worked like a man for 3 summers out there. And that was the best training I ever had in my life. Farmers were the best people I've ever met. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, outside of that, you know, I grew up and it was difficult. But I said after I got to Waupun, the leadership there and the administration were strong, and they were good for me. I needed that kind of discipline that they had, and so I enjoyed it. And I got to meet the best people I knew in my life there. They were really good staff, good people. I enjoyed it immensely. And the inmates, I enjoyed inmates. I say I worked just about every job in the joint, and then when I retired, I was an officer in charge of the tailor shop. We had between 80 and 90 inmates, 2 officers, 2 civilians, and I enjoyed that. I got to know, you know, many of the inmates, treated them all fairly, respected the rules, and had a good experience with it. But then I retired. I transferred from there to the reformatory, which was a big change for me in atmosphere. It was like I said, it was a juvenile institution. It was different. It was a little tougher to get used to. But it was, I did get used to it. It was a nice place to work, a good staff. So I enjoyed that too. I enjoyed all my jobs. I enjoyed corrections. I enjoyed working with inmates. I mean, I liked inmates as a rule. You know, I always imagined that if I were in that position, how I'd like to be treated. And that's how I acted. Well, sometimes that wasn't all reciprocated, but that's the way I took. And it seemed to work all right for me. And I think I got the respect of the inmates in that way, so it worked out all right. Sometimes it doesn't for some people, you know. I'm not saying all of our staff in corrections were angels, because they weren't. You know, we had some people that shouldn't have been officers. But you got that in any job, you know, so you try to do your best to overcome that.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect world.
No, it's certainly not.
And prisons are not perfect.
Yeah.
But they do pretty well.
What did you learn from being a father?
Oh, best experience of my life. I got married with Colleen. She had this 8-year-old, and she couldn't get pregnant, but we went to a doctor and they decided there was an operation that would enable her to become pregnant. So she did. She had that operation, and lo and behold, a few months later, we thought she was pregnant. Well, unfortunately, it didn't take. And she ran into complications of that operation and became infected, and she had some serious problems with it. Anyway, it was a big blow to me because I was really excited about it. And anyway, we, after that, moved to Fox Lake, transferred to Fox Lake, and after a while, we thought maybe we better try adopting. So we did. We went to the Children's Service Society in Milwaukee, and we went through the process and adopted a baby girl. And I got to tell you, it was the most important day of my life when we took that baby home. It was 2 months old. And I was probably the happiest guy in the country. I was thrilled to pieces. And I am to this day. So I really loved that. And after a while we decided, well, we better have a boy. So we went ahead with the process and adopted a baby boy, 2 months old. And got him home. Another ecstatic period of my life. I couldn't have been a happier guy in the whole United States. I just loved it. I know I was a big golfer. I quit golfing just so I could spend time. Didn't want to take the time away from it. And anyway, I'm a family man. I loved my kids, took care of them, did the best I could with them. We both did, my wife and I both. And again, it was the best thing I ever did in my life. I'm very, very happy with it. I'm happy for them. They turned out well. So I'm very grateful for what God gave me.
Now, you said your dad died when you were young, but what did you know? What did you know about him? You knew?
Well, not much. You know, we had a family of 7, and he was sickly. You know, when I knew him, he was my dad. And there wasn't a lot of interaction between him and I. You know, the family was just too big, and he was not well. So I didn't know him very well.
Mm-hmm.
I did know about him, you know, from people that would talk about him, you know. He was well regarded, well respected, but I didn't know him that well. He grew up on a farm in East De Pere. My grandpa, how do I put this? There's a little village east of De Pere called Culb's Corner. It's named after my great-grandfather. He founded that. He was a postmaster there. They named the town after him. And my grandpa went to his funeral. And he caught pneumonia. And he died 7 days later. That was my dad's dad. And he was only 36 years old. So my dad's dad...
Your dad was 36 years old?
Hmm?
Your dad was 36 years old when he...
Yeah. No, my dad was... my grandpa was 36 years old when he died.
Oh.
My dad grew up with a family of boys and 1 girl. And their mother raised him until he was 18. He joined the Army in World War I. And he went to a place in Colorado. I can't think of that mining outfit. He worked there, and then he joined the Army from there. Then he went overseas and fought in the war and got gassed and come home. Yeah, so we didn't really know him that well. I mean, I know of him.
Yeah.
But it was a trying time for all of us because he was at home when he was sick. He had been to a VA hospital in Woods, which was Milwaukee, and they couldn't do anything for him. So he come home and he was in a bedroom at home, and we all had to be mindful of that, you know. step around it and be quiet. And it was a trying time. It was really bad.
Sure. If let's wrap this up here. If you had one piece of advice for young people today, what would it be?
Oh, I don't know. I think be open-minded. There's so many changes going on that you have to be open-minded and look at the pros and cons as much as you can, and
Sure.
come to your own decision. And don't grab onto these so-called hastily contrived solutions to problems, but look at it in your own time zone and try to make the best of it what you can. I think too many people jump on whatever being pushed politically too quick, and they don't look at it, through their own focus. I think they've got to take the time to do that and try to come to their own conclusion.
Yeah.
They're going to have their own mind. They can't be led around by the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And that from both sides. So I think they have to do that. And I think that's the only way we're going to get out of this. Thinkers are going to have to think and come up with the best solution. Not be led around by the nose. I think half the country is right now. Going to put up with the news media. They only print, what they know. You have to have the news media because you have to have somebody that's going to tell you the news. It doesn't mean that it's all 100% accurate.
Yeah.
You got to question it. And I think the more you question it, the better off we're all going to be. But both sides. It doesn't make any difference if you're right-winger or a left-winger. You got to question it. And I think newspapers, much to my chagrin, they don't have any sense of fair play. They print the news.
No.
They want to know what's going to rile people up and get people's attention. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And people have to get out of that habit that, whatever they print, they're going to be right, And they have to question this. So I don't know if they're able to do that. Our colleges and universities have been, teaching the left-wing philosophy for so many years. I don't know if it can be changed.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's no balance there. There's no balance. It's too bad. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what you're talking about with the news media and stuff.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I'm trying to change with this project, is just kind of give as fair of a perspective as I can to a lot of different people. So, but thanks for talking with me today, Daryl.
Well,
I appreciate it.
It's I have no answers.
Yeah, well, thanks again for chatting with me. I think we'll wrap this part up.
Well, I think you're doing a good job. This is a good task. It's a good calling.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you make good use of it.
I hope so. I think so. I think we had a good discussion,
Good, good.
And thank you everybody for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe for more. Should have another video coming out in a few days. So everybody have a great day.